Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another thing where I talk about things. Today I would like to talk about politics. Yes, American politics, not Canadian politics. Although I will go and say I got some corrections on some of the stuff that I said about Canadian politics. I got some demographic data wrong, and some people brought up a couple other things just about the way that politics work. For one thing, Ontario is the biggest province in terms of population. I said that Quebec was. And I don't know why I said that, because when I went back and I looked, there was nothing anywhere that said at any time that Quebec had the largest population. I just kind of created that out of thin air. So, yes, if you watched the video and you were still interested in Canada, you should do your own reading, because I could have been mistaken about other things. But in any case, considering, on the subject of being mistaken about things, I figured today I'll talk about U.S. politics, another deal with many different facets and so on and so forth, but more in depth on the way that things have been going. The president gave his State of the Union address, and he said some very lovely things, and he's come forward with these lovely tax plans that sound very populist, and when I read further into them, I was incredibly disappointed, and I'll kind of get into why. Because I don't know, it's just wacky, and there was a night when I was just kind of like laying awake and I couldn't go to bed, and I was just sitting there and I was thinking like, oh God, what is even gonna happen to the country? And I say that like I tend not to do. I mean, like it's not something I commonly do, but I was just kind of starting to think about like, what if they don't fix it? I was just kind of having like one of those nights, and anyway though. But aside from that, in other news, Moot from 4chan. If you haven't seen this all over 4chan, I assume if you visit you would know this, because Moot posted the stream that he did on the site so that everyone could sit there and hear Moot talk. Moot's gonna leave 4chan. He's handing over the keys to someone else. He doesn't want to be the sole proprietor anymore. No telling how that's going to turn out. He said that he hasn't figured out exactly who he's going to hand the keys over to, but he's stepping down as administrator, and pretty soon he's just going to give away 4chan. The reason being that as Moot explained it, and I'll explain actually the deal going on with Moot, and this is actually relevant to the politics talk because it involves copyright law. One of the things that happened was in September, there around, they had the fappening. And if you don't know what the fappening is, that was when Snapchat had a security leak, and a bunch of celebrities had their nude photos leaked all over the internet. And it's I don't know if they ever figured out who exactly was responsible for exploiting this leak, but sure enough, if you've got naked images of people, like, one of the places they're going to go to is one of the biggest image boards on the internet. So I guess that what happened was Moot assumed that he was protected under the DMCA. As he explained this, he was on the phone with lawyers for like hours trying to figure out how to get through this. Moot is the sole proprietor of 4chan. And when you're a sole proprietor, it's a sort of business deal. It's a classification of business. A sole proprietor is a type of LLC that only has one member, and in this case, that member is Moot. Now, Moot has people that work with him, or under him, or for him, or whatever, but they're not technically company owners. LLCs are very common, but most LLCs that you see, they're partnered LLCs. A partnered LLC is a little bit different in that if they get busted with a lawsuit, they've technically got to take that money out of the LLC's specific bank account, and there are ways that you can screw with people, and so like an LLC has these kind of loopholes where if they get into legal trouble, there's still a huge pain in the ass to get the money out of them. Like, you may not see that money anytime. I've actually got a book on it on how to use LLCs to partnered LLC to basically to function as a protective measure for your money. But Moot doesn't run a partnered LLC. He runs a sole proprietorship LLC. That means that technically the money that 4chan makes belongs to 4chan in a way, but it's also kind of Moot's money, and so there's a separation, but potentially his own wealth and his own assets can be at risk if the courts should decide to do that. A sole proprietorship has less protections than a partnered LLC, basically, and Moot's got the sole proprietorship. So he explained this, and because the fappening involved a bunch of like really rich people with like really powerful lawyers, those really powerful lawyers apparently called up Moot and threatened to sue him. And it turned out that I guess that Moot wasn't compliant with the DMCA, so they probably had a case and they probably could have sued him. And I don't know what they would have sued him for, because he really wasn't I mean, I don't know what to say. They could have sued him for copyright infringement, I guess. But this is the thing. The DMCA is actually not a protective law, for the most part. Not for the average person. I mean, like anyone who expects to rely on the provisions of the DMCA to protect themselves without an army of lawyers behind them is a fool. The DMCA is not designed to protect people. The DMCA is designed to attack people. It's a sort of like just impromptu police power. Like any company, any big company, or any rich person, anyone who feels like they need to attack someone for a potential or even a perceived copyright violation is allowed to do so using the DMCA. They just ask and your stuff goes away. It's gone forever until you go through all this bureaucratic nonsense to get it back, and then it's kind of up to the provider whether or not they want to return it, and so on and so forth. The DMCA is an attack law. It's a police power. It gives authority to people to attack. You can be safe from it. There's a sort of base thing where you call base and you say, base, no one can attack me. Kind of. But you have to go through all this stuff. And so, like, Moot had to have a printed copy of his DMCA procedures, and like, he had to have a fax machine set up. And if you don't have all these things, if you don't follow all these rules for the DMCA, you are not afforded any protection. Anyone can bust your ass at any time they feel like. The DMCA does nothing for you. You're not a safe harbor. The law is against you. So Moot apparently hadn't set up the site to be protected under the DMCA, and I believe that this is probably what's prompted him to go ahead and just cancel the whole thing, because he said that he spent like more than $10,000 on lawyer fees getting the whole thing sorted out, getting the whole mess taken care of. And I guess that 4chan is protected in terms of the DMCA now, but it wasn't before, so he was actually in probably really hot water, legally speaking, before. So yeah, copyright law has finally caught up to 4chan. Basically, it's driven Moot from the site. This is most likely the biggest thing that's driven him. There's all the talk about the social justice warrior stuff and all that, but no, copyright law has nearly killed 4chan there. So anyway, so speaking of terrible laws and how we're kind of proceeding forward into 2015. And the issue of, like, you look at a site like 4chan, which is kind of hanging on by donations on its own, and is nearly destroyed by a law that was really written by and for corporate lobbyists, corporate special interests, and Obama gave he's been giving some really compelling speeches. He's been going around to red states. He was in like Kansas and Idaho and so on and so forth. I was hearing about this, listening to NPR. About how he was going around and telling everyone, like, these are, bipartisan issues, all these things plaguing the country, and they really are. And he's doing things, and he's proposed that college, community college needs to be free. He's proposing that they make community college free, and he's got a tax plan, actually, where he wants to provide a tax subsidy, sort of. It's a tax. Oh shoot, what is it? It's not a refund. It's like the tax credit. A tax credit for families that are working. Because one of the things that we've had happen over the course of the recession is we've had a ton of people drop out of the workforce. And when they drop out of the workforce, it actually raises the unemployment, or it drops the unemployment level, because, like, once you're no longer a participant in the workforce, they stop counting you. This is so that you don't get things like, say, like stay-at-home moms being counted as unemployed, because stay-at-home moms are technically, they're employed as moms. In a sense, they're employed to themselves or to their kids, just they work for free. So the census doesn't count if you're not in the workforce. They don't count you as being unemployed. So this is actually one of the ways that our unemployment numbers have improved, is that people are simply not working, and they've been without work for so long that the government just they ignore them. It's like, you're done, you're out. So what Obama has proposed is a tax credit, where if you're working, if you're holding down a job, then you get a $2,000 tax credit or something like that. I can't remember what the exact number was, and this sounded very dandy, but I looked into it and it turned out that it's a non-refundable tax credit, and what that means is it's based on your income taxes, and the way that income tax works is you pay a certain percent out, and then you get a deductible. And there's so many deductions and so many loopholes, and over time, they've done so much to try to give a break on the lower portions of the U.S. with these income taxes that the bottom 2/5 of the U.S., I believe, the bottom 2/5 of U.S. earners actually don't pay any income tax. So what this tax credit does is it will give people it's a tax credit for taxes that basically are not already paid. Because it's non-refundable, that means that you don't, at the end when you write all your taxes, you don't then ask the government for your $2,000. What they do is they look at your taxes and they say, oh, well, you didn't even pay $2,000 in income tax, so therefore, we don't take any deductions off. We're not deducting anything. You're done. Just whatever you have is what you have. So the bottom 2/5 already don't pay income tax. What this is going to do is this is going to allow everybody above the bottom 2/5 gain another $2,000 in tax deductions. It's actually a tax deduction more for the upper middle class and for the rich. So kind of funny, but I've started to actually notice a pattern with Obama whenever he talks about something or he really gets behind something. And this is actually probably not really just Obama. This is a lot of politicians. The more I follow politics, the more I realize that everything that they do is a scheme. It's kind of like it's never as good as it sounds. And it kind of, I mean, like that should be a no-brainer, you would think. But Obama is one of the ones who seems to kind of do it a lot. There's a lot of bait and switching. And not like the Republicans say. I mean, like the Republicans who get out there and they're like, Obama's a liar, Obama's a terrible person, he's selling out everybody and doing this. They're mistaken. When I say that Obama does the bait and switch, what I mean is that he delivers what he promises, but it's kind of like a monkey's paw. I mean, like you wish for healthcare to be improved somehow, like the poor can't afford healthcare, so you get Obamacare, and the whole plan is set up so that the poor are subsidized and they can afford healthcare. But the problem with Obamacare is that when it rolled out, although it subsidized the poor and they could afford it, the subsidies actually didn't scale very well, and so when you get to about the middle portion of the middle class, the subsidies aren't sufficient, and the increased cost of healthcare, thanks to the law, the way the law works, actually dings them. And so the middle class, the middle class, actually wound up paying more for healthcare rather than less. So it helped the lower class a bit, and then hurt the middle class, and the upper class doesn't care. So you've got that was one thing that was a little bit weird about it. But I mean, like, I guess if you're gonna hurt someone, I mean, at least have just a very specific bracket, a very specific tax bracket that you're hurting. But then you kind of go on and you see the law even further, and you realize that the law has this wording in it. It's written so that if the healthcare industry should collapse, the government will bail out the health insurance companies. And this is so that everyone who's invested in the health insurance companies is protected, and these are pretty much a sure thing now. In a sense, I mean, like they could still go down, but basically they cover their own asses. The people who are invested in the stock market, they're covering Wall Street. Every single time they do something, every time they pass a law, it seems like they're always covering Wall Street. Like that's all that they care about. And I think of them now anymore, politicians, as being just like, how many, you can't know too many people. I mean, there's like millions of Americans, but how many people do these politicians really know? I assume that there's over 400 people in Congress. So any one congressman has got to know like 50 congressmen, and then like a bunch of lobbyists, and that's probably it. That's probably their whole social circle. And all those people that they know have got to be just insanely wealthy. I mean, like, our congressmen are just rich. Like, they're rich beyond what most of us would ever hope to be. I mean, they're millionaires, they're billionaires, they're some of the richest people in the country. Our congressmen are. And the lobbyists are also fantastically wealthy. They deal with absurd amounts of money. And so there's all this kind of like money going on. And in their little world, I mean, like, when the economy rises and falls, they help themselves, they help their friends, they know what's going on with their fellow congressmen, and they sort of pass these laws and take these measures. And I think that they're just not in touch with anyone who's not earning millions of dollars every year. I feel like there was a politician who remarked he earned $400,000 a year. And I remember him getting so much flack because he got up and in front of everybody, he goes, I know how hard it is. He goes, I only earn $400,000 a year. And I just, it's so tough, and I can barely afford all the stuff that I need. And it sounded so ludicrous, but when I read about politicians and how they behave, they're kind of like high school kids. It appears that they really care about how well you dress, and they care about how much money you're making. And if you're only making $400,000 a year as a congressman, that's an embarrassment. You get made fun of at the lunch table. The richer congressmen, the better dressed congressmen titter and make fun of you and spread rumors. They say that you kissed Newt Gingrich. I don't know. They just just from what I've read, they just sound very human and just very human. And so I start to think that you get these plans, and they're all written by people who are very out of touch with the broader part of society. Because this is the other thing. I think maybe Obama, he seems like such a nice guy, and maybe he's really well-meaning. But then I read them talking about how he's really still enthusiastic about the TPP. And the TPP, that's our Trans-Pacific P agreement, and Trans-Pacific Partnership. So Trans-Pacific, it's the Asian NAFTA, basically, in the North American Free Trade Agreement. What NAFTA was is it was basically an agreement that said that we could export jobs, export capital, that we could take advantage of Mexico's cheap labor and then Canada's natural resources and this and that, and NAFTA has been heavily criticized because it actually caused a lot of job exportation. It allowed jobs to go, like I say, down south to Mexico where wages were cheaper, and it suppressed wages. We lost jobs. We lost manufacturing jobs. It hurt a few people. It wasn't really that popular with certain sectors of the country, and the TPP is pretty much the same way. What it's doing, though, is it's trying to open up, for example, Vietnam. And the reason why they want to open up Vietnam and allow them to export jobs to Vietnam is because Vietnam still uses child labor. And the child labor there in Vietnam is very cheap. It's very inexpensive. They can afford to have kids do a lot of manual labor. And this is what our companies want. This is one of the things the TPP is really all about. They also have basically SOPA-like laws in the TPP. They're going to harshen copyright law. They're going to make it harder. They're going to extend that harshness over to other countries in Asia. And thankfully, though, although the White House has been very optimistic about the passing of the TPP, most analysts are looking at it and saying that it's kind of a no-go. What has been leaked of the bill is wildly unpopular with people who are in the know about it. And even the countries that are dealing in it kind of don't want to have much to do with it. For example, Japan is irritated because we're trying to open up their rice markets. And we're trying to make it to where we can sell them rice. And Japan kind of lives on their rice, so they don't want to have people coming in to compete with their rice at lower prices, because it'll wreck them, it'll screw them. So there's a lot of different things in the TPP that these various countries kind of want nothing to do with. It's very corporate. It's not a very people-friendly trade agreement. It's just a sort of major corporation-friendly agreement. And like I say, I just find it weird as you get this almost just sort of like I say, it's the bait and switch where they talk about oh yeah, we'll open up the TPP and it'll be great for business and these businesses will expand. And I'm sure that they believe this, where they think that if these businesses are allowed to gain more money and gain more wealth, surely they'll grow. When the reality is that they won't grow. What they'll do is they'll just ship the jobs overseas and they'll earn money by cutting costs, not by having a superior product, but just by spending less on their product. So that's just kind of my perspective. But the community college thing, though, came up. This is one of these things that a couple of people, I saw some people posting on Facebook, and they were really enthused about this. They were like, wouldn't that be great? That's a step closer to what we need, public education, because education in the U.S. is getting so expensive that we can't afford it anymore. And we also needed healthcare to be fixed, because healthcare is getting so expensive that we can't afford it anymore as a country. And here's the thing, though. I don't think that Obama actually really believes. Maybe he does, but I'm not really convinced that he believes that he can actually make community college free. I'm not even sure that he wants to. I don't think that any of the Democrats really want that either, because here's the thing. Some of us know about the Koch families, right? The Koch families are the big, they call them the Kochtopus. The Kochtopus is, basically the Koch families are they're a rich oil tycoon. And what they do is they invest tons and tons and tons of money. Nobody even knows how much money they spend on right-wing politics. They make all these right-wing think tanks. They set up all these PACs. They're just barfing money into the right wing. They're notorious for it. It's ridiculous. And so the Koch families are kind of, they're somewhat reviled by people who don't like their politics. But they have so much incredible power behind them in terms of their money that there's nothing anyone can really do about it. The Democrats, on the other hand, they don't have a Koch family. What they have is the teachers union. And this is a little bit weird because you would think that, like, well, teachers, like teachers are really good. But the teachers union, it's kind of comprised of more like the private aspects of education in the States. And so you get a little bit of weirdness there too. They're actually not about, I mean, the teachers union does some good things. But so do the Koch families, if you think about it. I mean, the Koch families are like an oil company. We need oil. Oil is important. The teachers union does important things. We need teachers. Education is important. But they kind of also, they're very political, and they focus a lot on gathering money, and so they're kind of oriented on the money politics a lot. And you get into things like, for example, Common Core. Common Core has been launched with no testing. It's kind of a mess in terms of a teaching system. Most of us, we didn't grow up with that kind of system, so if you have kids and your kids are going to go learn Common Core, they're going to come home with homework that won't really make any sense, because what they're doing with Common Core is they're trying to teach your kids how to think of the numbers. And it's just sort of like it's a completely different approach to like mathematics or teaching in general. Common Core has just been hugely criticized. Like I say, they didn't do enough research on it. They pushed it out. And the reason why they did that was because there's money behind it. For example, McGraw-Hill has to sell new textbooks to go along with Common Core. And so McGraw-Hill kind of makes a killing on Common Core. They just make a ton of money. This is a great investment for them. And this is kind of part of the education thing that funds the Democrats. So that's why Common Core got pushed through, was because of the private education system, which donates money to the Democrats. And that's why also Common Core is a Democrat program. You'd think that it would be a bipartisan program. No, it's a partisan program. It's a Democrat program. It's a Democrat program because the lobbyists who make money on education, the education system, fund the Democrats, and Common Core made them a whole bunch of money. So, there's that. Yeah, so with the fact that the private education system actually throws a lot of money behind the Democrats, and that they make a lot of money from education being very expensive, I'm really not convinced that the Democrats or anyone from the Democratic Party would honestly go out of their way to make college more affordable. They might subsidize college with taxpayer money, but I don't think that they would actually do anything to hurt the education industry. I believe that anything that hurt the bottom line for that lobby would immediately be voted down by the Democrat Party. The Republicans, on the other hand, are really not very interested in making anything public, so you're not going to see any kind of plan from them. What I think that Obama is doing is he's proposing stuff. He's saying like, oh yes, we'll make community college become free, and we'll give these tax credits, and we'll do this and we'll do that. And these tax credits are really, like I say, they're just going to help the upper middle class and the rich. And the community college thing, the Democrats, I don't think will want to vote for it. And what I think is going to happen is that the Republicans will shoot it down, and the Democrats will use it as a talking point to try and make the Republicans look bad, so that way they can reclaim Congress and the Senate in the next elections. Basically, it's political theater. This is my take on it. I honestly don't think that they have any interest whatsoever in making college affordable, unless somebody in their constituency is making a profit from that plan. This is what I expect. This is what I've come to expect from politics anymore. So yes, the State of the Union was very rosy. Obama said a lot of things that many of us wanted to hear, but when you get into the technical details, it's somewhat gloomy because it's more politics as usual. It's kind of he talks about hope and change, but it's really just the same thing that has been going on in politics for the last decade. There's not really, what can I say? The Republicans do a lot of things wrong, and the Democrats do a lot of things wrong. And when you talk to ordinary people, like just normal people, you find out that they all really kind of want the same thing. The people on the right, They want deregulation, and they want to cut back on spending because they see stuff like they see regulations that are designed specifically just to help big companies get an advantage over little guys. They see these regulations. They see NAFTA shipping their jobs overseas. They see these regulations that prevent you from having your own. You can't set up a cable company in your city because the city has agreed. They passed a law that only Comcast can work in your city. Things like that. The Republicans want to get rid of these kind of nasty regulations that are hurting the public. They want to get rid of spending. Like, there's just all kinds of runaway spending problems, like bloat in the budget. There's a lot of paperwork. I was reading, we had the Paperwork Reduction Act, which was funny because you had to fill out forms in order to be approved to reduce your paperwork. And there were so many forms involved in the Paperwork Reduction Act that they actually increased paperwork. So the paperwork got worse, the bureaucracy expanded to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of chaff and there's a lot of bloat, and the people on the right who want to deregulate and who want to get rid of the bloat and who want to control spending and get the deficit down, they're right. There's a lot of work that should be done in those fields involving deregulation. And then on the left you find that there's people who basically want to... the left is better known for expansion, but what they want to do is they want to do things like they want to publicize healthcare, and they want to publicize, they want to make public education and things like that, and that's because these are industries, these are sectors that actually form best with economy of scale. They form best as monopolies. So, like, for example, schools will be the cheapest if they're all paid for by just everyone pooling their money together, and you're not really looking to take like a huge profit. Healthcare is the same way, especially healthcare. Because with healthcare, you can't really control your product exactly. I mean, like, if you get in a car accident, you don't then, like, get on the phone, you don't get on your smartphone and shop around and say, like, well, my leg is broken in a compound fracture, like, right now. But what has the best prices? Like, who do I go to get the best price on a leg sticking out of my flesh? Like, what do I do for that? You don't make that choice. You just go to the nearest hospital, you get your treatment, and there's no control over it. Like, if the doctors are good, the doctors are good. You don't really vote with your wallet. You don't do anything. Your leg is sticking out of your leg is sticking through your knee. You just go to the hospital. So, the free market doesn't work with something like medicine. It's just not a thing that functions. And the rest of the world, the rest of the developed world has figured this out, and that's why we have, of all the countries, we are twice as expensive as, like, our next competitor or something like that. We're just the most expensive country in the world to get medicine. Our education is getting the same way. All the rest of the developed world is focusing on if not already having and getting education that is paid for by the state, and their education is affordable. And stuff like this helps close the wealth disparity, and this is getting to be a big deal. The wealth disparity is continuing to get wider and wider. We're starting to see predictions now that the wealthiest, like, 0.1% of the world will soon own more than, like, 60% of the money. Might have been 50. Whatever the case, it's basically like this tiny little select group of 500 guys is gonna own more than half the world's money. Like, 500 people will own more money than the other 6 billion people. Like, this is what's going to happen with our money here coming up pretty soon. This is actually a global problem. The top 500 richest people in the world are not confined to the U.S. actually, but this is actually just a weird thing. This is one of these where, like, nobody knows what's going to happen with that, because everybody would have to sit down and agree that maybe having 500 people own more money than the rest of the world, potentially that's a little bit nuts. But I kind of don't know. In the U.S. at least, I don't think that we're going to get any control over the wealth disparity. I don't see any real moves. They talk about it, but everything that they do kind of defies the talk. Like, they know that we want it, but I don't think that they want it. I don't think that they're after that. But this is my take on politics. It's a little bit cynical, and I'm not saying... It's cynical, and you shouldn't get cynical. Like, you shouldn't get in this mindset that, like, oh, it's all just going to go terrible from here. Because people still have power. Like, when something becomes unpopular enough that a lot of people get riled up and they start voting and they go to the polls, when people get motivated, it does make a difference. Like, politicians can't ignore the fact that they will lose their jobs if people actually get informed and they move up and they go to the polls. the trouble is that the lobbies are so strong right now. Like a lobby, if they pay you $1 million, that $1 million might afford you 10,000 votes, let's say. And so you pass an unpopular bill, like if 10,000 people become aware that you're going to pass this terrible bill that's going to hurt the country or the state or whatever, and they won't vote for you, that's okay, because you got $1 million, and $1 million affords you enough advertising to get another 10,000 votes, and you just replace the people that you lost. This is kind of the way that lobbying, it upsets the balance. You need enough people to be angry that the lobbying doesn't defeat the people who are upset. This is how SOPA got defeated. SOPA had so much money behind it. It really looked like it might have been unstoppable. But companies like Google got the word out, and they made enough people angry about it that our politicians really just couldn't. They couldn't do it, because if they did, they would have lost their jobs. That would have been it. No one would have voted for them again because everyone told them no, and they did it anyway because their friends told them to. That would have just been blatantly irresponsible. They never would have gotten away with it, and they knew it. So the system still works. It just doesn't work very well. There's not a lot of grease on the wheels. It's just every time you try to, there's not a lot of momentum behind everyone's single vote. As a populace, you just don't have a lot going on. But what's concerning is you start to see a lot of, you've seen these populist movements that have sprung up. We've had Occupy Wall Street that sprung up, and then that collapsed. And then you had the Tea Party that sprung up and that collapsed. That was left and right, both making their attempts at a populist movement. I've heard that Occupy Wall Street got weird though, because apparently they got a lot of the gender politics into Occupy Wall Street. I don't know how that happened, but apparently that happened. The Tea Party wound up with a lot of really far right leaning. Basically, they just both movements kind of got co-opted by crazies. The Tea Party had me worried for a little while there. I thought they went insane and that they were going to keep making gains potentially, and I was worried that we were going to have crazy people running Congress, just seriously nutty folks. But they sort of lost their momentum once people realized that they were a little bit crazy. So the vote still works to some extent when people start to get nervous, when they're like, ooh, these people are a little nuts, It works. It's not like we have no power. But in some cases, though, it just takes a catastrophe to get enough people to the polls to where these politicians won't vote in favor of the lobbyists, I think. They've been talking about this as well with the F-35, the new F-35s. Is they're trying to figure out, you see a lot of analysts talking about this, is they're like, how could we stop the F-35? Because everyone who knows anything about jet planes, and everyone except for Lockheed Martin, who makes the jet planes, has been saying the planes are going to be terrible for the country. Every F-35 the country buys will decrease our combat effectiveness by however much the damn things cost. Because they don't do anything, they don't carry enough ammunition, they can't do close air support, they overheat, their cockpits are poorly designed, oh gosh, I can't remember. I think they had stealth trouble because their wings fell off. Maybe that was the Pac-Cafe. Maybe that was the Pac-Cafe. But whatever the case though, they've had so many problems, and they're so expensive, and they're not doing what they're programmed to do. So a lot of analysts were talking, I just read about this, where they talk about how might we prevent the government from spending any more money, and it's almost if it weren't the country's money, it wouldn't be horrifying. It would just be kind of adorable, because it's just sort of the congressmen are people. It's almost like thinking about how can I stop my grandma from marrying this guy she met at the supermarket. It's just one of these things. It's my grandma's heart is just set on marrying this creepy lecherous old dude she met who works at the supermarket because she's old and she's lonely and she's got dementia. And it's kind of like that, the government. You're just everyone, they're old and they're old and they have dementia and they don't know what they're doing anymore. And they know what they're doing. They're doing it on purpose. But it just feels that way when they talk about how might we prevent the government from buying more F-35s. It just feels like that. They're talking about their grandma wanting to date some little old man. Gosh, how do we break it to the government that this is the worst thing they've ever done? They don't want to hear it. It's so lucrative. It makes so much money for Lockheed Martin, and Lockheed Martin is such a nice guy. He's so handsome. Lockheed Martin. Oh. This makes my little old body tremble, my knees go weak. So, yes, government, like our grandma, And that's the bottom line. So that's my take kind of on politics. Is there's a lot of stuff that needs to be worked on, but I don't think that we're really on the verge of any of this stuff being resolved. I think there's still a lot of crap going on right now, and they're aware of it. They know. Our politicians know. I believe they're trying to figure out how they can have their cake and eat it too. And at some point they might realize that they can't. But the thing that worried me, the thing that kept me up at night was how long does it take them to realize they can't have their cake and eat it too? When do they realize that that basically things are too much, like you just can't take advantage anymore? Because what scares me is if education gets so expensive that only the rich can afford it, that'll pretty much be it for America as far as them being a first world country. We won't be a developed nation anymore. We will be divided into rich and we will be divided into poor, and the poor will work menial jobs. We'll be uneducated. We won't be in good shape at all. And the healthcare too. It's the same thing. It's like an imagine. We just can't get healthcare. A lot of young people can't afford houses anymore, and so we might get into the sort of thing where like families would move into their parents' houses, and then you have kids from your parents' house. And this is very common in poorer countries where like you can't afford. Not everyone can afford to have their own living space or live in their own apartment or whatever. Everybody would share a car. As you start to get these declines, you could see these sort of things happen, and life would just sort of adjust. I mean, this is what would happen is like one day, a generation from now, I'll kind of be looking at my kids, and they'll be like, they'll be living with me. I don't know if I'll have a house. They'll be living in my parents' house. If my sister, I don't know, my sister might get that. I don't know who'd get that. I don't know who'd get the house. My sister, somebody would get the house. But anyway, though, I could just sort of imagine this, and you just sort of adjust, and like they'd be living with me, and then they would have kids, and I would say, well, it's a harsh world out there, and I know we can't afford to buy a new house, so sure, the kids can live with me, and so you'd have like multiple people living in a single house. You'd start to have like big families all just living under one roof, and this is the way that poverty happens. That's the way that poverty works. Is you just start to get like everyone making do with what they have, and it'll create more burdens. Of course, you get more people in power. I don't know. It's just scary because that's the thing that'll happen is that it'll happen gradually, and everyone will adjust, and life won't necessarily be bad. I mean, like we'll maybe all still be happy and poor, but that'll be the way that the country sort of declines. It'll just kind of fall from greatness. There won't be anything. There won't be anything really all that great about America, and that'll be kind of how that goes. Yeah, doomy, very gloomy. But that's the reason why I was staying up at night. Is I just kind of like the gravity of the thought started to form underneath me, and I was like, oh no, what if we don't fix it in time? What if education just becomes unaffordable to the poor? What if healthcare becomes unaffordable? What if? But these are always dark thoughts. These are always dark places to go. So like I say, though, to end on a positive note, in spite of the terror of whether or not that sort of thing could happen, like I say, the politicians are aware of it. They know what's going on, and they're trying to figure out how to solve it while still making their own friends rich and while still staying rich themselves, while still coming up with clever schemes to take the money away from taxpayers and they're convinced. I mean, I think they have all these bizarre ideological theories that they kind of get. They're sort of insulated. Like, they're just really insulated, like, worldviews that they get from being very rich and not knowing anyone who's not very rich. And but at some point they might wake up and they might just realize that they're crushing everybody. And I know that it's not every Congress. There's hundreds of congressmen, and not all of them are like this. I think that probably just the more celebrity-like congressmen are like this, but plenty of them are sort of populist-oriented, and we might turn around. I get negative. I'm being negative, but it could turn around. It could get a handle on it. And so if you're very politically savvy, keep an eye out for people who are talking about this stuff. Read up when they propose a new tax plan. Like, I don't really want to. I'd be disappointed. I really like Obama as a person. I like him as a speaker. I like him as a politician. I think that he handles himself well in terms of PR. I like the way that he handles himself, abroad and so on and so forth. He's a good politician. I just don't really want to see any more policies like Obama proposes because they're so heartbreaking. And that's, that's the thing. I just want to see some politicians who kind of get out there and they say, like, we're going to come up and like, I've got a plan to get money into the hands of the middle class and get more people into the middle class. We're going to grow the middle class. And that's actually what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to make money for my rich friends. I'm trying to actually help the middle class. That's what I really want to see in politics. And I know that there are some politicians that are doing that. And best of luck to those politicians who are actually pursuing those goals. They're out there. I come from the place where I live. We've got some politicians who are still kind of in that mindset where they're a little bit like, no, we can still save everything if we just give all the money to me and my friends. We're doing great. We're being responsible. I swear, we need more of the money. I come from one of those states, so I'm a little bit more gloomy about it. But I know that there are states. I read about states that are talking about making those changes and kind of trying to get society on track and in a good direction. So some of you might live in more optimistic areas. Not to make everyone sad and gloomy. There is hope. There is hope. There's danger, but there's hope, and yeah. So anyway, that's my thoughts on politics moving forward, political horizons in 2015. I hope it all works out for the better and everything like that because all my friends are here. So it's all my friends except for my friends in other countries now. My friends, all of my friends in America live in America. So yes. So yeah, anyway, so that'll be it for today. I will catch you guys later.